The rain fell in sheets, obscuring the view of the world beyond. Clara's coat clung to her skin as she hurried across the bridge, her footsteps echoing against the slick pavement. The sound of her heels clicking against the stone was the only noise that filled her ears, a rhythm that matched the pounding of her heart. It had been one of those days, one of those weeks. Really, and Clara wasn't in the mood for much more than to get home, escape the relentless downpour, and collapse onto her couch with a cup of tea. She was already exhausted from work, from life, from all the little things that seemed to pile up until they were too much to bear. The bridge stretched out before her, a long and dark expanse crossing over the river that ran through the city. The water below churned, its surface barely visible through the veil of rain. The city was usually vibrant, alive with noise and energy, but tonight it felt distant, almost empty. The sky above was a deep shade of violet, thick with dark clouds that seemed to hang low, pressing down on the world below. The air smelled of wet concrete and the sharp, earthy scent of rain-soaked earth, and the city's distant hum was softened by the storm. The world felt quieter than usual, as if the rain had muted everything. But as she walked, her mind wasn't on the weather or her tiredness. She was thinking of the day's tasks, the conversations she had, and the empty feeling that always seemed to settle in her chest when the world around her moved too quickly. It was then that something caught her eye. Something out of place. At the far end of the bridge, where the metal frame of the railing met the concrete, a figure stood alone. The sight stopped Clara mid-step. She squinted into the rain, trying to make sense of the tiny silhouette. It was too small to be a man, too delicate, the posture slightly hunched. Her breath caught as she realized the person was standing right at the edge of the bridge, leaning slightly forward, staring out into the river below. The torrent of the water seemed angry and tumultuous, crashing relentlessly against the rocks and pilings beneath. The figure stood as if completely unaware of the dangerous height, or perhaps it was as though the figure was already too lost to care. Her heart skipped a beat. She could tell by the way the figure was positioned that this wasn't an innocent moment of contemplation. The person was too close to the edge. Clara's mind raced. Was it a child? Someone who had wandered away from their family? Or worse, someone who had come here for darker reasons? The weight of the thought hit her like a wave. She quickened her pace, instinctively drawing closer to the edge of the bridge. The closer she got, the clearer it became that this was no accident. The figure stood there, barely moving, utterly still. The closer Clara got, the more her heart pounded in her chest, each beat louder than the last. Was this person about to jump? The thought froze her in place, but then her legs moved of their own accord. She couldn't just stand there. She had to do something. Clara's breath grew shallow, and in that moment, time seemed to slow down. Every second mattered. Every step she took felt like it was stretching out in a painful eternity. She had to get there. She had to do something. The rational part of her brain screamed at her to stop, to think about her safety, but her instincts drove her forward, her feet carrying her faster, her coat flapping against the wind. She wasn't even sure why she was running. The scene in front of her was utterly surreal, like a nightmare playing out in real time, but she couldn't ignore it. It was like a primal pull to save this person, whoever they were, from whatever darkness they had come to the bridge with. "Hey," Clara called out, her voice trembling with a sudden rush of fear. She didn't know what to say, but she couldn't stand in silence. The figure didn't respond. It didn't move. "Please," Clara's voice cracked, but she didn't stop. She ran toward the edge, her heart racing now, a deep anxiety clenching her chest. The sound of the river below grew louder in her ears as she neared the figure. The rain was coming down harder now, slanting into her face, making her vision blur. The waterlogged streets reflected the glow of the street lamps, adding a ghostly light to everything, as if the world itself were watching. And then, just as Clara was almost within arm's reach, the figure shifted. Clara froze. For a split second, she wasn't sure what she was seeing. The person on the edge of the bridge turned slightly, revealing just enough of their face. Clara's stomach twisted when she saw that it wasn't a child, it was a young woman, no older than Clara herself. Her pale face was streaked with raindrops, her eyes wide and empty, as though she was staring at something only she could see. Her clothes were soaked through, clinging to her skin, but she didn't seem to notice the cold or the rain. Clara's pulse quickened. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of the rain and the rush of the river beneath. Clara's legs were frozen in place, her mind working too quickly and too slowly at once. What was she supposed to say? What could she say to make this person listen? "Please," Clara managed to whisper, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Please don't do this." The woman didn't move. Her eyes were still fixed downward, her arms hanging limply by her sides, her posture suggesting complete surrender. Clara's own breath came in sharp bursts, and her thoughts scrambled. She had no idea what to do. She had never been in a situation like this before. The anxiety was thick, tangible, clawing at the back of her throat. She felt a deep, uncomfortable feeling settle in her stomach. She didn't know this woman. She didn't know what had brought her to this place. But Clara couldn't bear the thought of her just standing there, alone, on the edge. She had to do something, anything. "Please, step back from the edge," Clara said again, this time louder. "You don't have to do this. You're not alone." The woman finally shifted again, a single tear slipping down her cheek. She took a step closer to the precipice, and Clara's heart nearly stopped in her chest. "No," Clara screamed, her voice raw with fear. "Please. Don't." The woman's lips trembled, and for the briefest of moments, Clara thought she might step back. But then, in the blink of an eye, the woman took another step toward the edge, her foot barely grazing the lip of the bridge. Clara's legs moved before her mind had a chance to fully comprehend what was happening. She was already running, her arms outstretched, her breath coming fast and shallow. She had to reach her. She couldn't let her fall. She was so close now. Clara's fingertips brushed the woman's arm as she reached forward, just as the other woman teetered on the edge. With one final desperate movement, Clara yanked the woman back, pulling her into her arms. The woman gasped, her whole body trembling violently. For a second, neither of them moved and the world seemed to stop, the rain still falling in soft sheets around them. Clara's hands were gripping the woman's shoulders, her own body shaking with adrenaline. She could feel the woman's pulse thudding erratically, and her own heartbeat matched it, a frantic rhythm in the midst of the storm. "Are you okay?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper, though she wasn't sure if she was asking the woman or herself. The woman didn't answer. She only clung to Clara, her body racked with sobs, her chest rising and falling with every broken breath. Clara could feel her shaking, her body trembling with such force that it nearly made her knees buckle. Clara held her tighter, not sure how to comfort her. She didn't know this woman's story. She didn't know what had driven her to the edge of that bridge. But Clara could feel her pain. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't just a random act. This woman was broken in ways Clara couldn't begin to understand. But Clara didn't need to understand. What mattered was that she was here, holding her, keeping her safe for now. She felt the heat of the woman's body pressed against hers, the frantic sobs spilling from her as if she had held them in for too long. For a moment they were both just two people in the middle of a storm, trying to find something to hold on to. "You're safe now," Clara said, her voice steady despite the panic still thrumming through her veins. "I've got you. You're safe now for a long time." Neither of them spoke. The rain softened to a steady drizzle, and the world returned to its familiar, haunting rhythm. But Clara wasn't sure if the woman had even heard her words. She simply continued to cry, her shoulders trembling under Clara's hands. The storm raged on, but Clara refused to let go. She was here, and that was enough. For now, that was all she could do.